Hello guys and welcome to another comparison video, and today we're going to compare Maya and Blender, right? Those two content creation tools. Now traditionally people believe that Maya is the industry standard to create models and things like that, do rigging, animation, all those sorts of things. Unfortunately, it's also very limited on things like it doesn't really do texturing, and its modeling is always people believe is not as good. Okay, before even Blender, that are things like Model or 3ds Max that could have better modeling toolkit. Of course, Maya has been evolved since then, and today we're going to compare Blender with Maya on primarily the content creation part, or aka modeling, right? And how that part fits in, and how does those two software compare in that realm. Haven't really touched rigging yet or animation yet, so that part is something that I don't think I have a lot to say. But from what I can see now with the structure of Blender, I highly doubt it's able to compete with Maya on the rigging part, but that could be changing in the future. I think the primary advantage Maya has is, expressions, and also node-based editing for all its internal structure is node-based, right? And Blender is currently using this data block scenario. So everything is kind of like reading a data block. It can be different type of data block, and they're reading that. Of course, that's kind of like cool. I like this idea. I like this, how this is kind of like programmer mindset. You can share data between each other. That's really cool. But the thing is, you still cannot do node-based editing on those things, and that's one of the Maya's strengths. And you can create a whole system doing auto rigs, things like that, by manipulating those tools and those nodes and program it to make it to automatically create those things. Of course, Blender supports scripting. That's cool. I think it can be equally capable on doing things like that, but it's also, I think, a little bit harder when it comes to because of the shortage of node-based editing. That could be changed in the future, because I have seen in the newer version of or experimental version of Blender, they're trying to do that, trying to bring Blender to a completely node-based package, but I don't know how hard that is though. Anyway, so that's just for rigging part. I think it's that, but both software are also moving on to compete with Houdini on procedural modeling. For now, it kind of feels like a joke, because you really want to compete with Houdini, you have a lot to do, because Houdini has so much work done already, so much work done already. It doesn't mean you cannot really compete, but for now, I would recommend anyone to try procedural modeling. If you want to get into that realm, right, go for Houdini. That's the best tool, and it's so much better than what Maya and Blender can do. They just get started. Okay, but we're not gonna talk about that today. Also, right, we're gonna talk about modeling. So let's take a look at that. Now, if you want to know the short answer, right, from a modeler point of view, if you want to be a hard surface modeling or environmental artist, right, on the term of modeling hard surface objects, go for Blender. Maya is in terms of tools, I don't think this is the realm that I feel like Blender is way ahead on some of the tools. Even the simplest thing like extrusion or beveling, you feel like the tool in Blender is way more comprehensive and has a lot of features and smaller things you can tweak to make it look really cool. Well, in Maya, they don't really change that much through the years. Okay, now we can just take a look at that. All right. So in Maya, right, if I have a cube here, now I want to bevel the edges, right? So I can do Control B, and I can Control B, right? And you can see it's beveled. But then, if you want to change how it's beveling, you have to drag things like that fraction, how many segments you have, depths, don't even know what that does. Oh, that actually does that. Don't know what that is, don't know what that is, chamfer. There are a lot of things actually. This is still a very comprehensive tool actually if you look at it. I'm gonna click on that and then I can check out every possible things you can do with this bevel. You can see, well, it's not too sharpy, right? It has a lot of things you can do with this bevel, like offset. Of course, I don't use them at all. To be honest, you don't really go here and really do much. Okay, smoothing angle kind of thing, right? But the problem is this is taking a lot of time compared to what you do this in Blender. So let's take a look at that. In Blender, right, I'm gonna do that. So grab all the edges, right, and then Control B, start dragging. Use the middle mouse well. You can start adding edge loops, right? Now this is much less a click, right? Let me do that again, as you can see, right? Now if you want to pull up that thing, you can hit F. One of the downside with Blender though is that, you know, once you have done that, you completely lost that. Okay, that's when Maya shines. Like here, you know, I did something, right? And I want to say, okay, I don't like that bevel. I want to be beveling to a different direction. I can do that because there's a stack of operations for everything you do. So now here's this bevel. I can go here and say, okay, well, I want it to be different now. You can see that's still in there. That's still in there. Even I did something to the faces, right? Like that. I can still tweak that bevel if I find that node, right? What's it saying? The depths, right? I can still do that, and it kind of like carries over. That's when Maya is way more powerful, right? Especially you can see there is a node editor here. You can see how the whole thing went through a step-by-step construction history. You have the basic, the beginning of the cube. You then, I don't know what that does. You extrude out the faces, you did some bevel, you tweaked it, extrude it again, and that's the final result for the mesh, right? That's the whole construction history. This is very similar to Houdini. Blender doesn't have that. That's the huge downside of Blender. It doesn't have that flexibility, okay? But in terms of doing hard surface modeling, that's an advantage because your model is clean, right? In Maya, you have to constantly press Alt-Shift-D to clean that up. In Blender, it's just gone, so it's automatically deleting history. That's when you can feel like those software has different mindset, right? In Maya, it's more like I want you to be able to be very flexible. I want to be able to build this procedural way of creating stuff, if that's possible, if that's needed. This is huge helpful for rigging. That's why I highly doubt Blender can reach to the level that Maya does when it comes to rigging. However, modeling wise, this is actually, I think it's a kind of like an advantage actually, right? Okay, so all in all, right, in terms of modeling tools and how flexible they are, I think Blender still wins in most of the cases. But I did show you some of the things that Maya still holds, you know, hold its position as the industry standard. It's the industry standard for a reason, and you can already see some of the things, right? Okay, when it comes to newer technique also, you do feel like Maya does actually did some pretty cool job here. Let's compare that. For character artist, right? If you have money, right? I think it's still better to use Maya and combine with ZBrush. When it comes to sculpting, ZBrush wins hands down. Let me show you that. Okay, so this is some ZBrush model. I have 2 million polygons, right? Now if I want to go ahead and do some sculpting, you can see this is very fluent. I have no lagging at all. I can do whatever I want, no problem at all, right? Can do really small and thin winkle sculpting, and you can see it goes really smoothly. Now let's see how this looks like in Blender. So I'm gonna go to this. Oh, do I have solid levels? Let me bring this down a bit. No. Okay. Right. So I'm gonna go send it to Blender by using GoB. It's a plugin that you can install to communicate between ZBrush and Blender. Very convenient. Let me pick Blender in this case and go there to send it to Blender. Okay, now back here to Blender, I can then do an import here. Okay, you see a lot of like a one-to-one match when it comes to feature, right, for sculpting, but they don't really hold up the same quality, in my opinion, compared to ZBrush. Now that's understandable because you have 1 or 2 person maybe working on the sculpting feature of Blender. You have a big team behind Pixelogic to work on and dedicated to work on the sculpting feature. There's no way Blender can compete with ZBrush for sculpting. Okay, it beats everything else, right? That's no doubt. But it compared to ZBrush, it's way behind. Like here, for example, this model, I'm gonna try to, of course, do some. Oh, you can see it's already kind of like having trouble. Oh, you know what? I think I'm switching to the edit mode. That would be disastrous. Right. Give it some time to come back. Also, I'm gonna send this model to Maya because there's one more thing I want to demo. So I'm gonna go here and then choose Maya, and then go Z. And that will send it to Maya, I believe. Maya will also have a hard time receiving it. Just Blender is just ZBrush is way better on handling a huge amount of polygon. You can throw like millions, tens of millions, sometimes even 100 million points, and it can still hold up okay, right? There's nothing else I see in this industry that handles that amount of polygon. I think Blender is just crashed. How is Maya doing? I think they're both crashed. Oh, is it coming back? Maya is. Oh, I went to weight painting. Let me go to the sculpting mode. Okay, so here if I wanted to go for a sculpting, I have a bunch of sculpting tools. I have those different shortcuts. Right, you can see this is lagging. Right, this is already lagging. That is the problem. So I wouldn't recommend anyone who want to do ZBrush sculpting, especially for high resolution model sculpting. Blender is not there yet, right? For this level of sculpting, you see the difference, right? In ZBrush, somehow ZBrush viewport is kind of like a little bit slower, but when it really comes to sculpting, you can see this is really fluent, right? No lagging at all. I can do whatever I want. I can even control D to subdivide it one more time. That's 4 times of the poly count that Blender is already struggling with. You can see I can still sculpt. It's almost no lagging. I can feel a little bit of lagging, but one thing you can do with ZBrush is Control Shift and drag over to an area, and that's when the viewport becomes super fast and the performance becomes super fast again. There's no lagging at all, and you can do a humongous amount of sculpting, right? Again, this is 4 times more than what Blender is already having a lot of trouble catching up. This is already lagging. So just because it has the tool doesn't mean it holds up the same standard. So Blender is not there yet, sculpting wise, compared to ZBrush. And of course, there are tools also that's not exactly the same. It doesn't have anything similar to ZModeler, ZRemesher, right? So that's a huge downside to me, but you know, that's basically different workflow, but I rely on that a whole lot. So it doesn't have that. And in terms of tool settings, or here, Dynatopo performance-wise is also way behind what ZBrush can do. That's also tested. I'm not going to show you that, but on the amount of polygon Blender can support, it's way behind. It can handle way lesser what ZBrush can handle. That's one thing. And also for the tools that we use, we cherish a lot in ZBrush. Those very advanced tools, those workflows, Blender doesn't have a very compelling alternative to me. I think if you're doing cartooning sculpting, I guess it's okay. But for high resolution sculpting, like you have a character, you have a lot of wrinkles and pores and stuff that you really want to define yourself, there's no way Blender can reach to the level that ZBrush can do, from what I can see. And even there are some other workflows. Okay, so in terms of character sculpting, especially for realistic character sculpting, I wouldn't recommend Blender yet. Okay, so that's one thing I can say for sure. You see the comparison, right? Another thing I want to talk about is retopologizing. Okay, so let me go back to object mode. No, object, come on, object mode. Okay, so if I want to retopologize this human head, Blender becomes a bit more confusing also. Like, first of all, I need to turn on snapping and choose face snapping, and also check on projection, project individual elements. And I need to have some model to start with, so maybe a plane here, scale it down and drag it maybe over here. Oh, and also I guess I can just go to component mode and then hit M and collapse it to a point. So that way I just have a point to work with. Okay, and then hit E button to extrude out some edges, and hit A and F to fill that with a plane, I guess. Right. Anyway, so now I can grab that and then start moving it. And also there's a tool here called the, what's this thing? Polybuild, right? You can start click and drag. Now this is basically retopologizing already, right? You can then drag out from the edge to get another edge. Okay, but there is a problem. You don't really see the model there. It's really frustrating. There's a plugin that I have installed here, and that's going to be called Draw X-Ray. Toggle that on, and you're able to do something, some better. You'll be able to have a much better visualization. And there are things for the options. You can see auto merge can be turned on. Then when you are dragging some of the edges closer to each other, for example, here you can drag it over here. When they're close enough, they should be merged. I guess that distance is just too small, so 0.01 maybe. Right, you can see that's merged. So you can do retopologizing, no problem. But again, this is when Blender is way behind compared to Maya's way. And I believe there are other things you have to do to get it mirrored over. Of course, you need to add maybe a mirror modifier. And before that, maybe you want to do that shrink wrap again somewhere, shrink wrap. And you pick the head model. Okay, that's one thing. And then we add a mirror. And we mirror it over also through the head here. Okay, and then we can go back to component mode and we can keep on going. Right, but you can see that's a lot of steps. Right, that's a lot of steps. Compare that to Maya. This is Maya, right? You grab the model. Whoa, Maya has vertex color there, which I don't want to see. Can I turn off that? Oh yeah, I can maybe use this. Yeah, okay. So in Maya, you make the model live, and then you use quad draw to. Oops, what's that? I wouldn't want to do that. You use a quad draw tool, right? And you turn on symmetry, and you can start doing that already. You don't have to turn on any plugin. drop down points and start to fill in geometry, right? Of course, Maya is the worst when it comes to how many polygons it can support. But you can see this is, I'm already doing it, right? In just 2 or 3 seconds, auto merge is on there already, right? I can add edge loop by holding down Control and click. I can hold down Shift to smooth these guys, right? And I can hold down Control Shift and delete an entire loop or just a point, I believe. Maybe I cannot do that, but just double click on that to open the 2 settings. You can see that's a lot of things you can do with those shortcuts, right? The modeling toolkit in Maya is amazing. Whenever there's a dedicated tool, right, they tend to do better. Right? I can extrude a whole edge loop, right? That's not, I don't know if you can do that in Blender. I can do this. I can fill that in first, add 2 loops, holding down Shift and fill in that. You can see how much I can do with Maya's Quadro tool. This is way advanced. Then it's like, how can I add edge loop? Maybe Control R. You do that and click, right? But then you kind of like a little bit out of the flow, and you cannot really drop down points. I guess that's okay, but still, I think it would be nice if you can do that. You can hold it down Control and drag out a line, I guess. You can Shift to get rid of that. I don't know if you can smooth it out. Okay. Doesn't say much. I hope there is kind of like something like this, because it doesn't say much about this tool in here. And also another really important thing that I use in Maya is to, because this is just like, you have to wait for it to do that. Like, you don't even know if it's gonna merge or not. You release it and then they're merged. That's weird. Right? How do I know if it's gonna work? In Maya, right, when you're doing that, you can see automatic snapping. It's those little things that makes a huge difference in real production. Okay, so you can see I feel like I can do this much faster in Maya. Okay. Right, so when it comes to character workflow, I think Maya and ZBrush combination would do a way more professional work than Blender when it comes to high resolution character creation. Okay, again, I'm comparing those tools with the same model, so you can see what I mean, right? Right. Of course, this is not bad. Like, if you wanted to say, okay, I just need something to work with, and I don't have the money to pay for Maya, this can work. Right? This definitely is workable. But man, like, if I want to extrude that edge, I don't know, Control drag out there. Right, that's actually okay, but I don't think it's easy to extrude unless I get close to that. Right. So still, there's some downside to this too. Okay, I think they're working on it on some. But yeah, again, like, if I want to move this entire edge loop, that's when Maya have its own way of doing that. So let's say I have an edge loop here, holding on Control Shift and middlemost drag will allow you to move this entire thing. And one of the really cool thing here is if you have a lot of geometry in here on the head, let me do that here. If you have a lot of geometry on the head, I need to smooth that out. Right, this is very easy. You can hold it on B even to make a soft selection and then smooth. You can see it's gonna relax everything quite evenly. This is fantastic. This is a fantastic tool. I don't think you can do that in Blender with the tools that I know. Of course, I'm still a beginner. If you know something, right, you think it's gonna do better, let me know, right? I would like to know. I feel like this tool can fit into my workflow in a lot of scenarios, especially for hard surface modeling. I would definitely choose Blender over Maya and I will try to do that for sure. But when it comes to character creation, I don't think it's there yet. I could actually use this Gobi thing to go back and forth, right? But in terms of for something more real, not more real, but something more higher resolution at least, I would choose Blender in this case. Okay. Right, I can still get pretty fast with it. It's not a huge issue, I guess. Yeah, this is still workable for sure. Anyway, so that's gonna be my basic impression on Blender. Compare that to Maya, right? And of course, for anyone who think that I'm wrong on some of the things, please let me know, right? I really want to know if there's some better ways of doing those things. I'm still learning Blender for sure, right? So I think some of my opinions maybe is just completely wrong. Who knows? Actually, one of the things I like is to be able to turn that off. I don't even want to see that face actually, because when you see that underneath face, it's hard to see the underneath. When you see the face, right, like that, it's hard to see the structure. So I oftentimes, when I'm doing this kind of like things, I'll go to the left string and make the mesh alpha 0. That way I'm able to pick the correct spot to put my point, to really make the shape, make the geometry, to make those vertices landing on the important turning point of the geometry. That's when the shape makes changes, right? I want to be able to be right on spot. Just because your geometry is on the model doesn't mean it's correct, right? Or it's able to represent the shape nicely. Right, anyway. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.